Hello and welcome to the Oddschecker betting show sponsored by 888 Sport. This is a very early Cheltenham 2023 preview reviewing the best of last week's racing at Prestbury Park. Stay tuned to find out who Johnny Ward will be taking in the titanic tussle between Honeysuckle and Constitution Hill.
It's a big call if they take on Honeysuckle because she is an absolute, she just beats whatever is in front of her. She's a warrior.
Where Andy Holding thinks impressive champion bumper winner Facile Vega will head for the festival next year.
Facile Vega answered all those questions and some. I know he's 3-1 for the Supreme, but I see him more as a Ballymore horse.
And a 33-1 shot outsider for Andy in next year's Stayers Hurdle.
That's two back-to-back decent races now he's put together at the festival. For me, could easily dominate that category.
Yeah, delighted to be joined today by Oddschecker's very own tipster, Andy Holding, and very special guest returning after the podcast looking at the Irish runners before Cheltenham. Johnny Ward is joining us today as well. And I'm pretty sure, Johnny, this is the earliest Cheltenham 2023 preview out on the market, hoping to hoover up all that SEO traffic over the next year as people look for tips in next year's festival starting in late March 2022. But for you, the festival didn't quite go as planned, did it?
No, I got COVID just before it, so yeah, I never made the trip over. And it's funny, this is a good time of year though. I think the Cheltenham markets the constant talk about Cheltenham like months and months and months in advance can be a little bit overbearing, but I saw dockets for Galopin Des Champs at 25-1 around this time last year for his Cheltenham race. And funny enough, the docket, like it goes into odds on. I think he's 999-1 jump at the last, and he ends up winning. So it can swing a lot in the space of a minute, and we're talking 12 months in advance here. But I think if you can potentially do a few multiples now in a few sort of related contingency areas, a bit like the guys in the Big Short who thought that the whole housing market was going to collapse. You might as well go for the big kill. Stuff like that can keep you very excited. I do think there is a bit of value. I mean, a lot can go wrong in 11 months, but there's some nice prices out there now. You just might have to slightly look against what other people are thinking.
It can make a fool of you as well. I had a ticket from March 2021 to go hard for the Supreme and Kilcroot for the Ballymore, which didn't quite go to plan in terms of them running in the wrong races. But I also saw someone who had Brave Man's Game at a massive price and had waited for a year, only a half an hour before the race or an hour before the race for the horse to come out, and therefore your bet's a loser.
I was saying that as well, right? So you're basically told in an interview half an hour beforehand, and I think we will talk maybe about this at some stage. Like climate change is obviously catastrophic, and it's going to be so bad. I don't think anyone knows how bad it is. But when you have a situation where Cheltenham is deemed universally to be too quick because they haven't watered it on the Tuesday, and then less than 24 hours later, it's borderline unraceable. That's the challenge facing the Kirk, the course, and Brave Man's Game backwards can attest to that.
Yeah, absolutely. Andy, for you, Cheltenham, well, you've already put out a column on the Oddschecker app, a website for your fancies for next year. Don't give anything away at the moment, but you think there's value to be had even at this very, very early stage.
Yeah, I didn't go into it in too great detail because I knew we were doing this, so I didn't think it was the point of replicating or duplicating horses I'd already mentioned. But yeah, there's a few areas where I think, like Johnny's already mentioned, you can get yourself ahead of the field if you're thinking outside the box. My own personal take on the Stayers Hurdle has been pretty much as it stood going into the festival. I thought Flooring Porter was probably the pick of a fairly modest era or vintage at the moment, and he proved himself to be very much to be the case. But I do think looking forward to next year if you chuck in a few that didn't make the gig. I think I've highlighted horses that didn't come to the festival more than anything else that actually did run in it. That could easily make an impression in that division. But there's quite a few other races that we can highlight, and hopefully me and Johnny between us will find at least one or two that will get themselves out to the next year's festival with some nice little prices or vouchers attached to them.
Yeah, fingers crossed. We'll get into it now. And this is being billed as a Cheltenham 2023 preview, but realistically, it just gives us a good opportunity to go through next year's races. We're going to start with the Novice Hurdles into the Novice Chases, Champion Hurdle, Champion Chase, Ryanair Stayers and Gold Cup. So the market's up for next year, but crucially, it just gives us an opportunity to speak to both Johnny and Andy on their thoughts after last week's festival. How Andy's numbers came out for a few of these horses, who are the horses to take out of these races, and we'll also at the end look at a couple of horses that could be running at Aintree who maybe didn't have things quite go their way at the festival, who might be worth keeping an eye on as well. So we'll get into the racing now. Do download the oddschecker app, where you can find all of the Cheltenham 2023 markets we're going to talk through, as well as plenty others as well. Lots of Ante Post racing up and day-to-day racing, as well as Andy's tips straight to the app every morning around 9 a.m. as well, including the best prices, bookie offers, free bets, place terms, and plenty others too. And Andy, we'll start with you for the Novice Hurdles, and this is basically just going to be a review of what turned out to be a procession for Facile Vega in the Champion Bumper. Facile Vega is a 3-1 favourite for the Supreme next year, 6-1 for the Ballymore, 10-1, 20-1 for the Albert Bartlett. Seems very unlikely that. American Mike 14-1 for the Supreme, who followed Facile Vega home, 8-1 for the Ballymore. You've got Mercury, an impressive bumper winner for Willie Mullins, who didn't come over for the festival, 16-1 for the Supreme. And then others, Il Était Temps, who raced very keen, 20-1 in the Triumph on the Friday, but was certainly an eye catcher in there as well. Redemption Day 20-1, James's Gate 20-1. Those are for the Supreme. James's Gate a short of 14-1 for the Ballymore. Plenty others in there as well, Andy. But let's focus with the Champion Bumper as well, and Facile Vega on what was testing ground, to put it mildly. They had to race around an incident on track as well. Just how impressive was that performance for you? And you've got a view as well where you think he'll turn up next season.
Yeah, I mean, he was impressive in the sense that he handled ground that we didn't know that whether he'd handle it or not. Obviously, it was soft when he won at Leopardstown, but nowhere near as bad as what it was come last race on the Wednesday. It was like biblical all day. I mean, I never came out the box I was in, and it was literally dripping off the roofs and standing water on the track, etc. So it really tested the mettle of every horse that went out in that final race, something they'd never been accustomed to before, running a good championship pace at the big field. And then, being able to face the hill and come up the hill. And Facile Vega answered all those questions and some, beating American Mike, who I thought got a smoother run through. I don't know what Johnny thought, but I think from a very early stage, I don't think Patrick was quite in the position that he wanted to be on Facile Vega, but the horse got him out of jail. American Mike raced wide as well on the better part of the track. So he had an advantage all the way around. So the feeling was that Facile Vega was slightly superior to American Mike going into it. I came out of that race with an even stronger view that is the case. But they're two very good horses. They pulled well clear of what was a decent field. Obviously, there was Redemption Day in there as well, and several others that had good reputations. It looked a good bumper. The time figure was no greater than what Facile Vega achieved prior to his victory, so he didn't do anything off the scale on the clock, but you wouldn't expect that on that kind of ground. But looking forward, like most bumper winners, certainly in the last decade or so, I think there's only been one horse who's won the Supreme Novices Hurdle, won the bumper, and that was Champagne Fever. Most of the horses that win the bumper tend to be 2.5 milers. I know Sir Gerhard almost did it by default, in the sense that he would have gone for the Supreme in any other year, other than obviously Willie being 3 or 4 handed in the race. I think he probably would have gone for the Supreme ordinarily, but he did win the Ballymore, and he proved that his stamina is very much the key components. And I think that's where we'll see Facile Vega. I know he's 3-1 for the Supreme, but I see him more as a Ballymore horse. You can get double the price for that as well, 6-1. So we haven't got it. It's always difficult to foresee what will happen. Obviously there's Constitution Hill, there was John Bond. They come from left field. Horses that are probably still acclimatising to certain stables at the moment that we haven't even heard of, that will end up making a name for themselves in the early part of the season. So we've only really got the Champion Bumper to go on, and of those, like I say, that took part in it, I think Facile Vega and American Mike will be more inclined to go 2.5. The only other one I think might be a 2 miler is Mercury. You mentioned him. He looked quite a speedy horse when he won at Gowran. I think we'll get a chance to see him at Punchestown, and if he was to win, maybe he might be a type for the Supreme, and maybe Facile Vega for the 2.5. That's the way I see it.
Especially with connections with Gaelic Warrior as well. You know, they mentioned that they thought Gaelic Warrior might be a Supreme horse, wanted to make the most of his mark, and maybe telling that Mercury was the one who didn't come over to Cheltenham to take up a possible champion bumper run. Johnny, when we spoke a few weeks ago, you know, we spoke about how the market looked to be paying maybe Facile Vega too much respect ahead of the champion bumper. You know, that corrected itself in the market. They went off much closer in price on the day. But then clearly Facile Vega making his superiority count. But, you know, on testing ground, and we can often see how over the course of a year these things change. Where do you think kind of at the early stages in those races the value seems to be?
I totally agree with Andy there. I mean, like Facile Vega is by walking the park out of Quevega, whose best form was possibly at 3 miles, possibly even our best form was at 3 miles in heavy ground. So his stamina, his massive stamina in his pedigree. But more to the point, it's what will go on the Supreme against him, whereas he will have absolutely no issue staying in the Ballymore. It won't be a problem for him whatsoever, and it might suit him. Whereas Mercury has a flashier sort of pedigree. As you mentioned, Gaelic Warrior at the moment, he's obviously still a maiden going into that race. He's a novice over hurdles next year. The fact that Facile Vega is 6-1, and look at what they did with Sir Gerhard this season. I thought his superiority over American Mike was quite stark on the day. It was just different class of animal, really. The way he just zoomed up by him and quickly went past him. Then, and American Mike kind of rallied very gamely, and I could see him winning the Ballymore next season if Facile Vega doesn't go there. But I would say Facile Vega is odds-on for running the Ballymore. I actually think he's an odds-on shot from that. And I'd make the Supreme odds against not going to run the Albert Bartlett, in which case 6-1. I mean, he's probably going to, you could easily see him going off odds-on in the race. So, like, I think 6-1 represents value. He's as good a winner of the bumper as I can remember seeing. I thought it was a really good run of the race. It was a strange bumper because he drifted in the market, and partly because of what Willie Mullins, I think, was saying on TV, whilst at the same time, a stablemate that few people had considered was absolutely smashed on the basis of Willie's comments, which had to do with the fact that it was pouring rain. But it was strange ground. It was ground that was too fast, and then got basically a monsoon on it. So it wasn't proper heavy ground. It was almost like somewhere soft. But Patrick, I spoke to him after the race, said he never had any issue about the ground himself. I make him odds on to go to Ballymore, in which case I think 6 is great value.
6-1, the one to take out of the Cheltenham Festival for next year's novice hurdles there for the Ballymore. 6-1 best price, as the guys say, for Facile Vega with a couple of firms. You know, should mention here, of course, if you're new to Ante Post betting, if you do back Facile Vega at 6-1 and he doesn't run in the Ballymore, goes elsewhere, then that will be money done rather than money back.
We're not non-running no bet yet, George.
That one day it will happen, won't it? As soon as the festival's over, a firm will go no bet. But at this stage, Andy, certainly not your accounts. No promotions
No.
as far as I know. But we'll move on to the Novice Chases. And we have the Arkle, where Sir Gerhard, the winner of the Ballymore, is 5-1 ahead of Constitution Hill at 6-1. I'm going to ban talk of Constitution Hill for this part of the show. I think when we talk about the champion hurdle, we'll get there for that inevitable loving. John Bon is 10-1. Appreciate it 10-1. Dice Art Dynamo 12s, Vauban 14s, Stateman 14s, Kilcrit 20-1. Plenty others in there as well. In the Brown Advisory Novice Chase, the Nice Guys 10-1, John Bon 14s, Manila Kakuna 16s with Journey with Me, Hillcrest 20-1, 3-Stripe Life 20s, and others around that price as well. And for the Turners, Sir Gerhard again and Constitution Hill, unsurprisingly, heading up the market at 5-1 and 8-1. John Bon 12-1. Appreciate it 14. Stateman 14s. Dice Art Dynamo 14s. Kilcrit 16-1, 20-1. Manila Kakuna, and you know it does feel like reading through those. At the moment, there are some pretty exciting novice hurdlers around beyond just the two that won the Supreme and the Ballymore. Johnny.
Yeah, absolutely, and you know, as much as kind of John Bon was beaten so far, I think he's a proper sort of chasing type. As you mentioned, the Constitution Hill talk is barred here. Still, if you're involved in that horse, it would be a fairly tough debate as to where you go in terms of his future. I don't know I might be going slightly left field here, but in the Arkle, as much as I think he'll be a 9-year-old next year. For me, Appreciate It has to go novice chasing because he just didn't jump well enough in the champion hurdle. He was sent off 100 to 30, despite the fact he'd been off for a year, which suggested that he was in good nick going into the race. I mean, he had a massive task on, considering the background. I thought
I didn't think he looked fit. Like, I mean, I'm not someone who looks at horses in the paddock and makes a judge, but just looking at him before the race, he didn't look. I mean, he looked like he hadn't run for a year.
Yeah, he's such a massive, big, burly horse. Well, I'd say it's not straightforward getting him fit, but for me, he's jumping. He didn't give himself any chance. And in fairness, the distance he was beating, there was no disgrace whatsoever. He was looked after by his rider. I cannot for the life of me see him hurdling ever again next season, in which case he presumably will go novice chasing, in which case he'll presumably turn up here, and he's 10 to 1. And I know he's a 9-year-old, but Willie obviously doesn't mind going novice chasing with older grade 1 horses, as we've seen. So I don't think it's kind of as cut as and dried with the novice chasers maybe as some of the other markets. But I quite like him at 10 to 1 to win the Arc next year, because I think that's the race he'll end up in.
10 to 1 for the Arkle next year for Appreciate It is the one for Johnny there. Andy, how do you see these markets at this stage?
Yeah, I think it's a case of trying to read into the minds of the likes of Mullins and Elliott and de Bromhead, and they must have a sit down, have a committee meeting at the end of the season, with their various riders and colleagues, and think, well, where are we going with this? There's a plan for this, blah blah blah, and you'd love to be a party of that, but you almost have to get into their heads and think, well, if I had these horses, what would I do? And you look at Sir Gerhard, you think, well, do they? I mean, they mentioned the champion hurdle afterwards, which in theory probably looks the right call, doesn't it? They haven't got too many options if they think he's going to be a Cheltenham horse. They're not going to go up to the Stayers, because they just about got away with it in the Ballymore because it was probably such a weak field this year. But I mean, all the intention was, other than the likes of Kilcrut and Dysart Dynamo, that they would have gone supreme. But they only did that by process of elimination, as I said beforehand. So I think that they'll drop him back to 2 miles. So it's either going to be the champion hurdle or the Arkle. Now, a lot depends on what, obviously, Honeysuckle and Constitution Hill, we've mentioned him again there,
which we'll get to
in a second. But if they were, in theory, going to line up at Punchestown, and Constitution Hill does a number on Honeysuckle, or they don't go to Punchestown and they declare that next year is going to be Constitution's champion hurdle year, then before going fencing, that might change the goalposts and the thought process with regards to Gerhard. Would Connections think, are we daft to go and take those 2 horses on when we've got a fairly free run in the Arkle? And let's face it, that's what they bought him for. He looks a chaser. He won a point-to-point, so he's already got the experience of jumping fences at a fairly modest level. So do they just completely rule out a champion hurdle campaign and just crack on with him over fences? If so, then he's got all the right criteria to be an Arkle horse. So I don't think 5 to 1's that pie in the sky. I agree with Johnny with John Bon. If you think the best form or race of the season was the Supreme, and the numbers suggest that was, then having shown up so prominently in the championship run race that probably in hindsight didn't go his way. I don't think they really wanted to try and make the running or take on Dysart Dynamo in the early stages. Then you'd have to say that John Bon came out of that with a great deal of credit. Again, I can't see Nicky wanting to go down the champion hurdle route. He's probably still got Epperton if he wanted to go down that way. And of course, he's got Constitution Hill. So why would he risk wasting another season with John Bon? So you tend to think that he'll go for the Arkle. And I'll just throw in another one as well from left field. There's probably 2 actually. Again, using Willie Mullins' mind as a guide here, with State Man, who won the county hurdle in very impressive fashion. I mean, he was unbelievable, considering that was only his 3rd run under rules. I mean, you can't take away how good he was, and the clock said it was a good race as well, a lot quicker than the Triumph hurdle, and he did it very easily. Again, where'd you go with him? Presumably he'll go to Punchestown, he'll win it. He might win a grade 1 there, but then he's got to go up into the champion hurdle bracket, and I think, but like we saw with Galopin and the Champs and Bob Ollinger, it's going to put a lot of people off trying to basically bang their head against the wall, taking on the likes of Honeysuckle and Constitution. And if we think those are going to be the 2 main players for next year's champion, so they'll be looking for easy options. And State Man falls into that category, along with West Cork as well. You look at West Cork, who finished 4th. He loves Cheltenham. He won the Great Wood early on in the season. Then he ran a blinder, didn't he, in the county hurdle itself. And we know what Dan Skelton does with good young novice chasers. I think my Drago, barring his injury, would have been hardcore bound or certainly a novice chase bound at Cheltenham, and he would have been a big player. So Dan knows what he's doing with good novice chasers over 2 miles. So just a couple from left field there out of the county, State Man and West Cork. They were thrown into the equation, but definitely Sir Gerhard and John Bon out there, two respective quality races, are quite rightly at the top end of the market.
West Cork is an 8-year-old going on 9 as well, so you never know. Exactly. Could be 2 9-year-olds contesting the Arkle.
Yeah, we've lost sleep of our senses there, Johnny, to be honest. But yeah, I just thought it was worth throwing into the mix, because I think that's where I think West Cork will go novice chasing next season now.
West Cork is 33-1, and we've also got
Stateman's 20.
We have their Stateman's 14s, so 14s and 33s for the Arkle. Any views on the the Turners or the Brown Advisory at this stage, or too early?
I came out of the Albert Bartlett thinking that Minella Kakuna was a lively one for next year's RSA. I'm going to call it the RSA because it might be a different name next season.
Good point.
I thought he was amazing at Cheltenham. He made one bad mistake down the back, but I mean he got the field stone cold turning for home, and it's a hard race to make all the running in and race that freely for 3 miles over that demanding new course. But I think the old course would really suit him, providing obviously he takes the fences next season. But he's got the physique and the way he goes through his races. He reminds me of Monkfish. I don't know what Johnny thinks. Like big, tall, imposing, sort of almost like giraffe-like, isn't he? The way he dwarfs his opponents. He gets over the ground really well, and I can't see him not taking defences. I think Willie will just straightly, bang him over fences 2.5 miles first time out, and then he'll gradually work him up. You can imagine running the Dublin Racing Festival, maybe running in that race that Galopin Des Champs won, etc., etc. But he does look a 3 mile to me, out and out. So yeah, he'd be something I'd be very, very interested in for the old RSA, the 3 mile chase.
Minella Kakuna 16-1 for the RSA, as we'll call it here now. Johnny, anything else to add, or should we move on to the champion hurdle?
Yeah, I could see John Bond stepping up in trip to running the Turners. I think he's 12-1 with one firm. Sir Gerhard is sort of favourite for that race. I don't see him running that. I think, as Andy says, I think he dropped back in trip for the Arkle, and he moved up in trip just because of circumstances this year. I could definitely see John Bond stepping up in trip. He just might slightly lack a gear for 2 mile races. And in terms of the RSA chase, yeah, I think that's a fair shout on Minella Kakuna. He's shown that he's a really adept jumper of hurdles. I thought he was brilliant at Leopardstown. And don't forget Minella Kakuna as well, who's obviously out, did miss Cheltenham, but basically looked an out-and-out 3 mile chaser as well in his ephemeral career so far. But John Bond's an interesting one because I could definitely see him running the intermediate race.
What do we think will happen with Dysart Dynamo? A horse that came into Cheltenham, went off favourite for the Supreme, was taken on from the front and made a mistake and fell about halfway around, but presumably loses little in defeat in terms of what he's capable of. Where do we expect him to be pitched next season?
I'd say they'll have to change tactics a bit with him, in the sense that, I don't think you can ride a horse like that and win a Supreme. I'll definitely be interested to know how the Supreme works out going forward, because as a race it was quite bizarre. I sort of tipped Kilcrut in it, and he ended up finishing third, but he basically never went a yard. He could never get into the race. What Constitution Hill achieved on the clock has been well advertised, but Dysart Dynamo, for me, if he's going to be ridden like that again, he's really limited his scope. We'll see him going over fences, but I think they'll have to get him to chill out a bit.
Yeah, Andy, any thoughts where Dysart Dynamo? At least over what trip is he another horse? He'll be aimed at the Arkle.
I think it's almost impossible to contain a horse like that for anything other than 2 miles. He's just got so much raw ability. We saw how he got on with it, and then Moscow Flower. Johnny's right. They probably might have to change an approach with him, maybe just to settle him down. But I think it's very, very difficult to bottle a horse like that up and get him to stretch out to 2.5 miles. I could only see them going down the one route, and that'll be the Arkle route if they do go over fences.
Okay, we'll move on then to the champion hurdle now. And we've got Constitution Hill is the 9-4 favourite ahead of the unbeaten Honeysuckle at 7-2. Vauban 8-1, Sir Gerhard 8-1, Bob Ollinger 20-1, Stateman 20-1, Pied Piper, John Bond, Anna here, plenty others, all 20-1. And I'd be lying, Andy, if I didn't say that I enjoyed watching the opener on the Tuesday. I think I held my breath for about a minute before he jumped the last flashbacks to Old Goshen. Such a similar moment off the turn when he just suddenly pulled away clear, and you knew all he had to do was jump the last two, and it was an unbelievable performance. And as Johnny says, we've heard from yourself and others just how impressive it was on the clock. What are we talking about here with Constitution Hill? And just for context sake, in case anyone's listening, Connections have come out and said that as a 5-year-old that they feel there's no need at all to go chasing immediately. Talk that he even had a muscle issue over the past couple of years that means he's still developing. I don't know what that means in terms of his future scope, but it looks set, unless things change, like he'll be aimed at the champion hurdle next season, possibly with a big matchup with Honeysuckle before the season's out.
Yeah, I mean, we're always in danger of getting carried away with horses and anointing them as the future champions and the greatest horses we've ever seen and all that kind of nonsense. But I think potentially with Constitution Hill, we could be on that bracket with this fella, because his performance just visually was amazing. But then when you actually crunch the numbers and do sort of your furlong per furlong or flight per flight performances, and you put the two races up together, Honeysuckle and the Supreme, and the devastation of what was achieved in that first race against the champion hurdle was quite extraordinary. I mean, they were nearly 20 lengths ahead of Honeysuckle if you was to put the two races up alongside each other when the tapes went up. By the time they jumped the second hurdle, I mean, it was quite extraordinary the pace they were going. I mean, I stood on the lawn outside, and I said to the fellow next to me, I can't believe how quickly they're going here. It just felt, I mean, I've watched a million races, but you could just feel and sense the pace that they were going. It was quite extraordinary. I almost think that the front two had lost leave of their senses, but Constitution Hill just had absolutely no problem all the way through it. It was a bit like watching the old Rooster Booster when he won the champion hurdle, when, the two went off and he just tracked them and, picked them off in the home straight and quickened up the hill. It was like watching that. But yeah, I mean, we're dealing with a novice right at the top draw here. I can't wait to see what he's going to do in future. If Honeysuckle's in his way, then based on the numbers at Cheltenham, then I think the Honeysuckle camp has certainly got plenty to think about and plenty to worry about. I also think it was a very shrewd move as well by Nico de Bonneval. Nothing's been picked up on it as well, but coming down the hill, if you remember, he was just about going to pull out and go to the right-hand side of Dysart Dynamo. What an amazing sense of foresight that was, because he actually almost second guessed what was going to happen. It was almost as if he had a crystal ball. He decided to come back inside, and then Dysart Dynamo jumped out to the right, fell. But if he would have gone to the right-hand side, he would have been brought down. So it was a genius move by Nico de Bonneval to actually wait and go back inside again. But yeah, he was just amazing. I haven't seen a horse come up the hill off the back of that pace for a long time. The fastest horse that we've ever awarded a time figure for at the Cheltenham Festival. What else can you say? Everything about him, visually, numbers, future prospects, it's just everything's there for him. So yeah, he'd be favourite for me over Honeysuckle if I had to price him up at Punchestown. I think it's going to be your next question.
Yeah, it is. I'll ask both of you. So, Andy, how would you price them up, and Johnny as well? If they do meet? And it seems like, from what I'm reading, rather than Henry de Bromhead's shrinking in the face of what it would be the toughest challenge to Honeysuckle's unbeaten record, he seems almost to be quite put out by it all, and seemingly quite bullish about wanting to prove that that his mare is the one that you want to side with. I mean, how would you price up if they were to meet in a few weeks' time?
What price? I'd probably be 4-5 Constitution Hill, 5-4 Honeysuckle. I'd put it this way. I'd be prepared. I wouldn't mind. I'd lay Honeysuckle at 5-4 if it's the bet like that, because I think Constitution Hill is a better horse. Andy? Honeysuckle in a match against Constitution Hill. Yep.
Yeah, we'll arrange that off air. So,
a couple of DMs off air. Yeah, I think that's important.
Yeah, It is. I
it'll,
really hope
it'll be for a handshake. That's all, isn't it?
a
So,
handshake. Yeah, I really hope this happens because I got into racing when Rooster Booster was around, and I didn't understand racing at all. Maybe I still don't, but he was obviously a novice going into not Rooster Booster, but Rhinestone Cowboy when he was a novice taking on the big boys, and it was amazing. And we saw with Samcro, things can go wrong. It's a big call if they take on Honeysuckle because she is an absolute, like, she just beats whatever is in front of her. She's a warrior. She gives me the impression now that she just kind of does enough. I thought at Cheltenham this year, I thought she produced a good turn of foot again. She was always in control. She basically was never really going to lose the race, despite the fact she was nowhere near as visually as impressive as Constitution Hill. I just can't knock her at this stage. I've knocked her enough, and I do wonder if he takes her on. He'll definitely be in a battle, I would have thought. He'll be in a proper race, and for me, she should be favourite. He is a novice. It's a massive challenge. And I'm sorry, like beating John Bond in a horse who'd set up a crazy pace for him. It's just not the same as taking on Honeysuckle. Tactically, it'd be an amazing race to watch. I don't know how it will work out. Hope it happens. I don't know. Andy could be right though. He could go off favourite. He's favourite for the champion hurdle next year. She's going back to try and win it as a 9-year-old. 7-2 for me is very fair each way price. That's the race she's going to end up in. 9-year-olds have won a Rooster won as a 9-year-old. Hurricane Fly won as a 9-year-old. She's basically been perfect at Cheltenham pretty much every year. Still maybe a slight suspicion as to where he goes next year. She will turn up in the race, all going well. 7-2 for a horse has been basically even money odds on the last 2 festivals, and she seems as good as ever. But Punchestown will be made by this if she takes him on. It'll be an amazing race, and there'll be massive split in each camp. Like Andy and I are disagreeing here. I think it'd be nearly 50-50 in terms of you're backing possibly the greatest mare since Dawn Run against a novice, yet the novice might be favourite.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, 7-2 Honeysuckle, 5th of 3 there. And as Johnny says, unless for injury, you can't really see any reason why Honeysuckle won't take up.
Who would you back, George?
You know the answer to that, Andy. I think I'm Team Constitution Hill. I'm just very excited. I mean, there's no need now. I had a couple of messages from people after the race saying you owe Barry a pint, and I want to make sure that I've told Barry that, and I've messaged him and I've told him that he's, drinks are on me next time we're together. So yeah, I mean, it was.
What if Barry had the 40-1?
I hope so. I mean, I feel bad if I did and he didn't, to be honest. No,
it was a funny race to Supreme because, like, I was texting my mate and I said, mates during the race, and I said, Crota is so well placed here because they are going a suicidal gallop. But he was legless. He couldn't even go to gallop in a restrained position. And Constitution Hill, ordinary horses wouldn't have been able to stay going as he was. Yet he won by 22 lengths. So maybe he's a complete freak.
There was also a moment when they were going quick before Dynamo fell, where Nico had to give him a squeeze, which was the first time we'd seen that, and then he came straight back on again, and he that was the moment where he didn't need much persuading to stay up with the pace, even when they were going as fast as that. I mean, the one horse before we move on that I want to kind of talk about, who's maybe the joker in the pack here, is Vauban, who was incredibly visually impressive, Andy, in terms of that win in the Triumph, in what looked to be a pretty decent Triumph. I mean, what did the clock say in terms of that, and where do we expect Vauban to be campaign next season?
Yeah, it wasn't a particularly strongly run Triumph, hence that it didn't work out as well as the Spring Juvenile time. We got him doing a 71 in the Spring Juvenile, and he only did a 66 in the Triumph. So, as I said, he didn't need to be at his best, but he just dominated throughout. The only problem with Vauban is that he does throw in the odd sloppy jump here, then everywhere. Mm-hmm. He tends to sort of like just lose a little bit of focus.
Even the last. I mean, he kind of. I mean, I don't know.
Well, that was the one that was almost a Goshen moment, wasn't it? When he looked at the photographers and took his eye off the ball.
But then impressive again how he quickened again after.
Oh yeah. I mean, he had to quicken twice. He quickened from 2 out to go by them, quickened to go away from them, and then they've come at him again after that mistake, and he's quickened again on the running. He's got loads left. I mean, he's just a very fast horse. I actually think he'd be better running right-handed, looking at him, the way he just sort of like always lugs towards the right. I mean, Paul Town will just say, he was always looking to come towards the stance side anyway. But there was a moment jumping 2 out when he did seem to be hanging the latch a little bit. So I think something like a Punchestown will seem in even better light. But look, Constitution Hill did an 84 on the numbers at when winning the Supreme. And this fella's only done a 71 tops, so he's got a huge amount to find on Constitution Hill if they are thinking of going down the champion hurdle route.
What do you reckon, Johnny, in terms of Vauban and how he compares to this lot?
Yeah, like as Andy said, it was the same at Leopardstown. He was leaning a bit right at his hurdles as well, and I think he'll be better at Punchestown. I love the way he picked them up so readily when he gave them a chance after last. In the form, it was a slowly run race, but the right horses were involved, and he just has a serious turn of foot. This horse, a real like his ability to probably win very good flat races, and I think they will go down that Melbourne Cup route with him. I think winning the Melbourne Cup at this stage will be one of Willie Mullins' kind of final ambitions, maybe in as a trainer that he hasn't achieved. But it's a massive step up jumping wise to go into the cauldron of Constitution Hill and Honeysuckle next year. And I imagine he would probably be found out as a 5-year-old, who obviously, as we know, tend to struggle in champion hurdles.
On then to the Champion Chase next, then, where Energumene, the winner of this year's Champion Chase, is a 7-2 favourite. Shiskhkin out to 5-1. Nicky Henderson pretty confident and pretty bullish about the fact that it was purely the ground that was the case for Shishkin's no-show on the day. Nico doing the right thing and pulling him up as soon as he realised that he wasn't enjoying it at all. Fernie Hollow 8-1. Galopin Des Champs, an interesting one at 10-1. Fell when absolutely streets clear in the Turners, and interesting to hear Connections afterwards talk about stepping him back in trip when I think a lot of people assumed that he would be a Gold Cup horse for next year. Bob Ollinger 10-1. Edwardstone 12-1 could scarcely have been more impressive. Andy, what do you make of the field at this early stage? Firstly, I guess, do you think it's fair that the top two have flip-flopped off the back of what was effectively a very impressive win from Energumene on pretty testing ground, but also not the match that we were hoping for?
Yeah, I mean, we're all sometimes in this game accused of falling into the recency bias trap, and we forget what happened in the past and we just concentrate on the latest bit of evidence. And of course, that latest bit of evidence was tarnished by, unforeseen circumstances on that Wednesday when it just rained all day, and I clearly took Shiskhkin completely by surprise. He just never went a yard that day. I mean, he just jumped off. He ran like Defi Desoy did in the race a few years ago. Defi Desoy, a big odds-on shot, got in there off the back of all those wins, and he looks as though he's going to go down and come back. But Defi Desoy couldn't get his feet out of the ground that day, and he was a beaten horse past the stands. And I almost just go as far as to say Nico was on a beaten horse after he jumped the first. There was just something not quite right with Shiskhkin that day. Like I say, whether he's got that fragility in him, and if he just doesn't fancy it, he'll just drop the lot, or what, I don't know. Whether that hard race at Ascot didn't leave a mark on him, certainly didn't leave a mark on Energumene, who's probably made of slightly tougher substance. But it remains to be seen now how Shiskhkin develops next season, whether he fancies it again. Obviously, he'll have to have better ground, and at least good to soft ground this time next year to be a consideration. Because you wouldn't go anywhere near him under similar conditions, and I don't think Nicky would probably even risk him if it was soft or heavy and was in the ground description. But I think this is a hard category to sort of decipher at this early stage. We know Energumene is going to go down this route, and ironically, having not won the race before, he's now got Energumene, but he's also got the conundrum of Fernie Hollow, who didn't make the Arkle gig and probably would have been a short price favourite, may have won it. And then he's obviously got the Galopin Des Champs conundrum. Where do you go with him? And John will probably have a better view than I would, but I mean, he was destroying the hitherto unbeaten Bob Ollinger, making him look very much second rate. But then do they keep him in the 2.5 mile category where they've got to run against Allaho? I mean, they've both got attacking styles of running, so Willie Mullins won't want to compromise each of his superstars by running them against each other. So you're only left with dropping him back into the Arkle. You think, well, he's got Energumene and Fernie Hollow in the stable. Fernie Hollow's a free going type. So again, that sort of he's a bit out of kilter with what Galopin Des Champs would want to do. And then you think, well, the only other route is to go up to 3 miles, which they weren't. Where they were quite reluctant to do at the festival this year.
Why do you think they were reluctant to do that? And that reluctance seems to have continued after the race as well. I mean, from what I can see, that there seems absolutely no reason why he wouldn't stay 3. He wasn't for stopping on.
No,
I mean, apart from when he fell.
All along, I thought the 3 mile race was tailor made for Galopin Des Champs. Given that what he did at the Punchestown Festival, and he won the Grade 1 over 3 miles. he looked going into the festival as though going up rather than coming down would be the key to him. But he showed that much speed and the way he jumped his fences, the alacrity and the power that he had, and just the pure raw galloping brutalness of that performance. You think, well, Christ Almighty, it'd be a good horse to keep up with that over 2.5 miles. Look, whatever happens with Galopin Des Champs, he's just a brilliant horse. He's one of the best we've seen for a long, long time. He's got such a good engine. But the decision as to where to go with him, to categorically say, right, that is our race next season, I'm not sure they can make that decision just now.
Johnny, where do you think Galopin Des Champs will end up? And also, given the manner of Bob Ollinger's win on paper, are you surprised to see them kind of side by side in this market?
Yeah, I see Galopin Des Champs winning the Gold Cup next year. To be honest, I think they're going to change tactics with them. I thought that race was bizarre, to be honest. I think Bob Ollinger was nowhere near his best, nowhere near his best. And I know the winning margin back to second was huge, but there were probably 2 races going on there.
Yeah.
And for me, Bob Ollinger was legless coming up the hill, and it wasn't a good performance from him. Galopin Des Champs, for me, jumping wise, I thought it was a bit of a mixed bag, to be honest. And I'm not even talking about his fall, which was practically a perfect jump up until, for whatever reason, he went over. But he still is kind of novice at these fences, and I'm not sure making the running actually suits him. When he was very impressive as a hurdler last year at both festivals, he was given more restrained rides, and I'm not sure he's as much of a kind of a head the ball as the way they ride him. And in which case, he shouldn't have any problems getting 3 miles. Does he get the Gold Cup trip? Willie doesn't really have a Gold Cup horse at the moment if it's not Galopin Des Champs for next year. And as you know, as Andy says, he has the winner of the Ryanair the last 2 years. He's ample opportunities in the Champion Chase. Galopin Des Champs doesn't, to me, look like a 2-miler out and out either. So I think he's going to go the Gold Cup trip. They showed with the Allaho this year with Apple Tardwater, if you can get a good horse to settle in the Gold Cup, and he can kind of just relax in a race and jump all right, and he has a turn of foot, he can just pulverize him. I could see Galopin Des Champs doing something similar next year, because I think they're going to change the way he's ridden. I think they're going to chill out with him a bit. What they do at Punchestown is going to be very interesting. Presumably he comes back and runs at Punchestown. Where does he go there? And that could tell us a lot more. For me, in the 2-mile division, I'd be looking at Fernie Hollow for the Champion Chase next year. I just hope his injury, it's a suspensory ligaments, didn't sound like it was a terribly bad injury. He's 8-1 for the Champion Chase. He's definitely not going to run any other race. That's where he ends up if he runs in at the festival. I backed Shiskhkin on the day. There's some races that, if you back Ginto, you're demoralised on many levels. But I'd never backed Shiskhkin before, and it was just such a sour race to watch for me, because to a horse that's unbeaten, you back him and he just doesn't go a yard, and then you've Shakin Poursois falling as well, and I thought the race completely fell apart. So I'm not sure what honours Yamin achieved. I found it hard to see how people could fancy him to beat Shiskhkin at all. Shiskhkin absolutely flopped. For me, there's a major question mark against him now. So I would be looking at Fernie Hollow for the Champion Chase next year. And I see Galopin Des Champs going up and trip. I don't think he's going to be running in the Ryanair. If he's that good, he's got to run him in one of the main championship races. And why not try and turn him into a Gold Cup horse and dream that way?
Do you think you might go for the King George?
Yeah, I do. I do see him possibly going for the King George, and that's. Again, we'll see what happens at Punchestown, but he clearly stays 3 miles. There's no issue with 3 miles. He stays as a hurdler, yet he's probably a better jumper of the fence. So he's getting older. Why would he not stay 3 miles? And Willie obviously won the King George this year. Yeah, I could definitely see him going that route.
Yeah, 10-1 for the King George at the moment, with Allaho 8-1. Long Press we'll talk about shortly, 7-1, and Brave Man's Game 4-1 favourite at the moment for the King George. On then to the Ryanair, where we have Allaho, the 5-2 favourite, with Galopin Des Champs 6-1, Shiskhkin 7-1, Shakin Poursois 12-1, Energumene 12-1, Edwardstone 14-1, who we need to talk about. Bob Ollinger 14s. Let's talk about Edwardstone quickly now, because I guess it's more likely that he goes for the Champion Chase, probably I'd have thought, than the Ryanair there, Andy, but priced up for both. Maybe one of the performances that's been spoken about the least, possibly because it'll be seen as a fairly weak renewal. What did you make of Edwardstone's win?
I think 1 or 2 in that race didn't run their races, and that includes Riviere de Tel. She ran nowhere near the time figure that she's been capable of. We got her basically metronomically knocking out 75 time figures upwards. Her fastest was an 80, and regularly she was like a 77, 76. Edwardstone was a 78 going into the festival, so he was bang up there. And when she didn't run a race, she basically Edwardstone took advantage. But it wasn't as strongly run as I thought it might be. I mean, crunching numbers afterwards, I think we only got it at 69 or 70. So even though Riviere de Tel looked as though they were, went off at a reasonably good gallop, like I say, it didn't work out as well as I thought it would figures wise. But look, he beat what was in front of him. Probably ultimately ended up being not a vintage race. He would have to step up markedly on what he did in the Arkle anyway, to be up against the likes of an Ergamin or one or two others we mentioned. Fernie Hollow. I think Fernie Hollow would have won the Arkle had he turned up. He just looked different gearing. The way he won over in Ireland. He looked a much miles better horse than Blue Lord, and Blue Lord was third in the Arkle. So using him as a guide, then I think Fernie Hollow is the top novice for the season if I'm awarding horses.
Looking at the Ryanair market, Johnny, Allaho 5-2 will to many stand out, and especially if we don't anticipate that Allaho will be pitched up against Galopin Des Champs, but it's pretty rare that horses come back and win the Ryanair over and over again without looking to step up. And we've seen the Mullins team tried Allaho over 3 miles, tried Allaho over 2 miles before. They said it themselves, finally clicking that 2.5 miles was the trip, and I guess the performance of Allaho, as was the case in 2021, was one of the most impressive of the week. So do you see him coming back again, looking just to regain that crown and win 3 in a row?
Yeah, as a 9-year-old and make his kind of own history in the race, definitely. I can't see why he would go anywhere else. Maybe 5-2 appeals to you. I mean, he's won a fairly ordinary renewal of the race. He was obviously the shortest price favourite of the week. If I'm going to speculate on the Ryanair, I'm going to go with Bob Ollinger here, because I think this is the race he ends up in, and I'm willing to forgive him. Like Henry de Bromhead said, he could not believe anyone could do what they did to Bob Ollinger, and he's doubled down after the race, and the confidence they carried into Cheltenham, I think they think he's way better than that, and I don't really know what happened with him. But he's 14s with William Hill for the race next year. I'd have a small bet on that. I think this is the race he'd likely end up in. He was basically odds on for or even money for the novice equivalent race, and it'll probably be a stronger Ryanair next year. It's possible Shiskhkin may end up stepping up in trip. Can't see Galopin Des Champs running the Ryanair against Allaho. That just simply won't happen. So Allaho, 5-2 is fair enough. I'm just not sure. He might be taking on a better caliber of rival next year, and I'd have a small bet on Bob Ollinger. I think he'll be able to bounce back, hopefully.
14-1 best price on Bob Ollinger. Andy?
Yeah, it's interesting with Bob Ollinger as well. His time figure was the slowest time figure the whole week. It just shows you what destructive nature Galopin Des Champs inflicted on him. He was literally punch-struck up the running. And like I say, stopping the clock on him, he actually completed in the slowest time. We only got a 58 for Bob Ollinger, which is a ridiculously slow time for a Cheltenham Festival Grade 1. So it went from something like Galopin Des Champs, if he would have won by 20, 25 lengths, doing something 75 plus, to Galopin Des Champs, Bob Ollinger crawling home in a 58. So, yeah, Johnny's dead right. That was nowhere near the level that Bob Ollinger's shown previously.
I think Andy's hitting on an issue there that again is relevant in the talk of a 5-day festival. There were 4 runners in that race from Ireland. There were 6 runners in the old 4-miler, which now looks like a race that doesn't serve any purpose at all. So when you have a horse winning at Cheltenham who's basically legless, he's beaten 2 others in a Grade 1 novice race, something just not quite right about that. And you're watching a horse, you can have lucky winners, but you had a winner of a race here by a wide margin who himself was absolutely legless in a Grade 1 at Cheltenham, and that should not be happening.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, didn't help that in that race he had plenty going for the RSA because those top 2 looked so strong. But I'm certainly in agreement that when we're having a conversation, maybe one for another podcast, but the 5-day festival is not.
Absolute disaster 5-day festival.
Absolutely, agreed.
Look at all these mares races. I mean, what are the point? What are the point of these mares races now? They're going to just bring up more mares races to make it a 5-day festival, and I mean, Does the Mayor's Novice Hurdle excite you as a race? Does the Mayor's Chase? I mean, so I'd agree with Andy. Disaster is the word.
Yeah.
I haven't spoke to anyone in the game who thinks it's a good idea.
No, I agree. And also, it just feels like there's already, the festival's saturated enough that I think we missed out on a fair few decent matches and decent with the horses looking to avoid each other without adding yet more.
Well, this is it. We want to promote healthy competition. We don't want to make it easy for horses to sidestep another one because there's another race available. I mean, that's just not what competition's about, is it? We want to see the best against the best, surely.
Absolutely. We're going to get on to the Gold Cup, which is, seen to be the best against the best, certainly over the Stayers trip. But firstly, we'll do the Stayers hurdle. And from Allaho, one horse who's will be looking next year to make it a hat trick, into Flooring Porter, who is the 5-1 favourite for next year's Stayers after a pretty impressive win. Although Andy will, I'm sure, pick some holes in a second, as he's all buzz about Buzz, 14-1, the injured horse who Andy put up for the race this year, 14-1 for next year's Stayers hurdle. The Nice Guy 14-1, Bob Ollinger 16-1, Time Hill 20s, Champ 20s, Zanahir 20s, Love Envoy 20s, and 25-1. Bigger than that, Andy.
Yeah, I mean the Stayers hurdle category was a race I was really dead keen at the start of the season to take advantage of the betting, because I just thought that it was all over the place. At the time, I thought Flooring Porter was a suspect favourite, but things transpired to make me think slightly differently further down the line. But yeah, I ended up putting up Buzz at quite an early stage based on his Cesarewitch win, and if he did do what I thought he would do over 3 miles, he was the one that could easily usurp a lot of them. And barring that injury, then when he was favourite for the long walk, I was going down the right road. Hopefully he'll come back. I mean, obviously it's a serious injury, so he might not never get back to what he was. But if they can get him right, then he'd certainly have to be a contender. Based on what we know of this lot, Flooring Porter, a good worthy winner on the day, it has to be said. Great ride by Danny Mullins. It was probably one of the rides of the festival. Yes, he had a very winning accomplice and a jumped particularly well from the front, but he just basically just toyed with them. He stacked them up at the top of the hill. You could see him moving his hands and just sort of visually giving him a breather. And if you were betting in running, then there was only one horse you could ever be backing in that race, because he got that race won a long way out. But the likes of Time Hill, Paisley Park, Champ. I mean, I can't believe Classical Dream was favourite. That was almost one of the odd bits of betting of the whole week. I couldn't get my head around that. They all look very much of a muchness, aren't they? This bunch, and again, it was indicative of in previous years that the Stayers hurdle time figure once again come out incredibly slow compared to the Pertemps final. The Pertemps final always seems to be a better run race, more cleanly run, and perhaps a little bit more of a reliable form guide going forward. I'm not suggesting we've got Sir de Burley in this year's handicap that could go into open company and be a Grade 1 horse, but I do think there's going to be a floater coming through. Hopefully it might be Buzz, because I do think this category is up for grabs. And the other one I'll just throw into the mix as well, which I put up in my column this week as one. This is coming from a right crystal ball kind of outlook. I don't think Vanillier has really taken to fences.
Oh, he hasn't, Andy.
No, I mean he was a creditable third in the 3 or 4 mile as it is now, but for me he wants to go back over hurdles, and I can't get out of my head how devastating he was when he won the Albert Bartlett, beating a good field that day, and that's the kind of horse we're dealing with. I think when he's on song, obviously Cheltenham he comes good in that time of year. We know Cheltenham suits him. That's 2 back-to-back decent races now he's put together at the festival, albeit one of them through duress over fences. But yeah, if there was to go back over hurdles with him, and I think they might run him in the Irish National, give him one more go. And if he flops in that, then the connections will draw stumps and send him back over hurdles. And for me, he along with Flooring Porter from the same yard could easily dominate that category. He's a big price for Vanillier.
Yeah, I'll get you a price now. Vanillier is
33s, I think.
33-1.
So, yeah.
33 is best price at the moment for the Stayers. Crystal ball time there from Andy.
Bit of a left field one, yeah.
Gavin Cromwell knows what it takes to get a horse primed and ready to win the Stayers. Whether or not he'll want Vanillier challenging his stable star, Flooring Porter, we'll see. Johnny, how do you see the Stayers market?
I'm just looking at Blazing Cal's price there. He's 33s, and he's sort of a forgotten horse as well, because obviously he was. He's 25s for the RSA, as we call it. That, I think he'd probably go down that route. That could be an all right shout. 25s to the RSA, because he was pretty flawless over hurdles. I thought the Stayers was just a bizarre race this year. They just, the one thing I would say about Florian Porter is his jumping was so good that he was able to maintain control of the race throughout. And it was interesting looking after the last. If you're having a debate about the whip going forward, will there be a whip around in 5 or 10 years' time? Danny Mullins never used a whip on a Cheltenham winner in a Grade 1. He just corrected him, tried to keep him straight when he was wandering about a bit. And he kind of went away again, or certainly maintained his advantage after the last, got a soft lead. I'd probably, if I have to have a bet in the race, he's certainly to run the next year. And he's been a very good winner of the race twice, so he is coming into the big bucks category. 5-1 might slightly underestimate him. Totally agree with Andy about Vanillier. His jumping issues have been apparent basically all season, but he was poor in the 4-miler, as we call it, and I could definitely see him going back hurdling. And he will run in this race if he goes back hurdling. It's nothing to do with the fact that he stalemates in the race. They're different owners, and I could definitely see him going back hurdling. Yeah.
Vanillier, an outsider for both. And before we get to the Gold Cup, Andy, just want to ask you about Love Envoy, who won the Mares Novice. The Mares Novice run over 2 mile 1 doesn't seem like a perfect race to then move into the Stayers, but she has won over 2 mile 5 on heavy. She's won over 2 mile 4 in her run before the festival. Dino Blue certainly didn't turn up on the day, sadly, after being well backed. Your selection there, Andy. But on the clock, could Love Envoy be capable of this kind of step up in class?
No, I think she's got to find a huge amount. It was only a 64 the Mares race. So albeit she was an impressive winner and beat a deep field, or it was certainly a competitive field. She's nowhere near the level of great the top quality Grade 1 horses. But yeah, that was probably my biggest disappointment the whole week. Dino Blue, I fancied her for my life, but I just thought it was a strange ride by Mark Walsh. Obviously, he was riding under instructions. I think they wanted to make plenty of use of her, but she was just way too keen. I thought they would have just dropped her in and give her a chance and got a cover and a bit of settle. But she had 2 horses either side of her. I hate that when you've got a horse who's quite keen. You've got one either side that are sort of pushing you forward and making you sort of go a little bit quicker than you want to. And if the writing was on the wall for me, she was always going to fade out of it. I just think they got the tactics wrong with Dino Blue. So hopefully she'll bounce back.
Yeah, hopefully she will. On then to the Gold Cup, and A Plus Tard is the 9-2 favourite, the winner of the 2022 Gold Cup in absolutely breathtaking fashion. The way he hit the line was one of the most incredible things I've seen up that hill. I think Galopin Des Champs, 5-1, who we've discussst. L'Homme-Presse, who I mentioned earlier, 8-1. Johnny there talking about the whip, and I think it was just one crack at the end there for Charlie Deutsch for L'Homme-Presse to go and win. Last week, Monkfish, maybe the forgotten horse, ruled out of this season through injury, 16-1. Statler 20-1. Bob Ollinger 20-1. Allaho 20s, and plenty others 20-1 as well. Johnny, it was. At this stage, it looks like a fascinating Gold Cup field. There's a long way to go till we get there, and lots will change. But plenty of exciting horses to try and challenge A Plus Tard's crown.
Definitely, yeah. I was amazed really with his performance this year. I thought he was a vulnerable sort of favourite in the sense of having to overturn Cheltenham form with Manila Indo. When the Manila Indo came to second last, the way he did, could you see A Plus Tard running away from him as he did? It was an incredible performance. Manila Indo really, really weak in the betting on the day, but for no particular reason it seemed, and just the different tactics. And again, if I were having a bet on this race last year, you've 9-2 about a breathtakingly good Gold Cup winner who has a great record at Cheltenham, who's going to go in the race next year. So yeah, it's attractive, but it's probably the bet I'd have in the race. There are dangers lurking in the sense of Galopin Des Champs. Will he run the race? I think he probably will. L'Homme-Presse was brilliant, in fairness to him. Monkfish, can you come back from an injury that he had and then go straight into win the Gold Cup? Statler, in fairness, won, albeit an ordinary renewal of the 4-miler. It looks very interesting. In fairness, A Plus Tard 9-2 isn't a bad price, because that performance, it'll take. I'm interested to see what Andy says on the speed figure, but you'd imagine if he produces that performance next year, he's nowhere near a 9-2 shot.
Andy.
Yeah, he was the second quickest the entire week. Constitution Hill was top, then a Plutard, and then Energumen was third top. Those are the three. Oh, and Alaho as well. They were the three races that we awarded a speed figure of over 80 or overwards, and that's pretty much the CV that he's got. He's got a Plutard every time he turns up. If he's in a reasonably well run race, and most of the times he is because he's running at Grade 1 level, he seems to be able to run to those kind of numbers: 81s, 82s, 83s. His form sheet is just littered with fast times. He's just a brilliant horse, isn't he? He's hard to knock. Johnny's absolutely spot on. 9-2 doesn't look a bad price. Back in the day, it was, it's hard to go back to back in this race, but Album Photo did it. Obviously, Best Mate did it 3 times, and I think he'll have the campaign off Henry de Bromhead that won't bottom him. I think he'll pretty much have the same races lined up for him again: Savills Chase, Betfair Chase, and then perhaps come to Cheltenham relatively fresh off the back of just 2 runs. So it's not as if he's going to be having lung busters on the way up to the festival. So I think 9-2, if you wanted to lock in your money for that long, you're going to be looking at the favourite again next year. But a lot depends on what Galopin Des Champs done. We talked about him. If he was to step up into this category, then you'd want to follow him over a cliff, whichever direction he was going to go in, because he's just a superstar in the making, isn't he? And Long Press is equally commendable as well. You can't fault his performance. He did a good number in the old RSA. So we've got a deserved champion that is likely to be close to unbeaten coming into the race next year, touch wood, up against perhaps 1 or 2 of the ones who we think could, easily do a thing or two over the 3-mile trip.
Is there a case to be made to back Manila Indo at 25s? I mean, you're looking at Plutard at 9-2. In fairness, how much shorter is he going to be on the day? You think the race would have to fall apart a fair bit to be much shorter? And Manila Indo finished second here off the back of what's been a pretty disappointing campaign, who clearly goes very well at Cheltenham. And again, as Johnny says, where else is he going to go? I mean, if he's fit and he's healthy, he's going to come back to this next year.
If you probably get he only finished in the top 3, maybe, but not 25.
Yeah, well, that's it. But that's it. 25 to 1 each way would be. That would be the way I'd like to play it.
I mean, he got so duffed up in the end that it's hard to see him ever turning the form around with his stabber companion. But 25 to 1's probably a slight overreaction. They're not that far. They're not that far apart. So if you wanted something at a price now, then he's certainly going to give you some value anyway on that front.
Lovely stuff. Well, that's our Gold Cup preview, and that brings our 2023 Cheltenham Festival preview / 2022 review to a close. But before I let you guys go, as mentioned at the top, just going to ask you for maybe a couple of horses that didn't hit the frame or didn't win their races, who you think are worth keeping an eye on, either at Aintree in the next couple of weeks or in the coming months.
Galopin Des Champs has to come to mind. I think he's one to follow. But I'll let Andy go first.
Andy.
Yeah, I'm a big fan, and I have been for a long while now. Of Jericho Rock. Once again, I put him up in the Ultima, and he gave me a great spin. He was a bit of a surprise, really, because Tom Skirnham had him fairly handy from an early stage, i.e., right to the fore. I thought he'd just be behind the leaders like he's always been ridden. He was always just behind the speed at Warwick. In the Classic Chase, he was just on the fringes in the Mandarin, and I thought, God, he's going to have to be a good horse to lead this out. He literally led for a circuit as well. He took it up going in front of the stands, travelling well, but his jumping was absolutely flawless. For a young horse having his 5th run over fences, he never missed a beat. He was still banged there at the last, and of course he got picked off in the end by the more patiently ridden Kayak Rambler, who had nothing to do with early speed. But to hang tough as well as he did for such a young horse for a long way in a race like that, I came out of that race with nothing more than a healthy regard for him. I'll be surprised if he isn't a forerunner for a lot of those big staying chases next season, the Welsh National, that kind of race. And then ultimately, hopefully, he might turn into be a Grand National horse. I think he's tailor-made for those big fences, the way he jumps. So definitely Jericho Rock. I'd keep him on side. And one of the most unluckiest horses of the whole meeting was a horse called Party Business. You'd have to go back and watch the video on this, John, if you've got a minute. But I think there was a schmozzle at the second hurdle in the boys' race, the Martin Pipe. 2 horses fell right directly in front of the path of Party Business. He literally got broadsided. He went from mid-division to last. He was still last going past the stands, and he somehow dragged himself to 5th he was full of running at the finish. I'm not saying he would have won the race because that's just open to total subjectiveness, but he was really, really unlucky. And I know that Ian Williams actually fancied him going into the race. I sort of was chatting away with somebody who knew him the other day, and I said, "Oh, you got anything next few days?" And he just said, "Party business in the Martin Pole." And I looked at it, I thought, "God, 50 to 1 shot," but he wasn't far. He wasn't far wrong. So if he was to go at Aintree, I'd be more than interested in Party Business if that was to be the case.
Party Business, one to keep an eye out, along with Jericho Rock for Andy. Johnny, what have you got for us?
Yeah, I didn't do enough of a study for this, but a couple of horses, I suppose, that came to mind. I thought Three Stripe Life performed really well in the Ballymore. He's traveling really well for a horse by leading light in his races. He really does pick up the bridle. He just didn't have the gears for Gerhard, but he's a lovely, lovely horse going forward. Obviously, Galopin Des Champs, Gaelic Warrior, I think, as much as Andy alluded to there, he would have been an extremely lucky winner because of the interference Brazil suffered. But all in all, considering he was very keen to post, I think he's going to make a lovely horse going forward. And has there ever been more of an eye catcher in the field at the festival than Galopin Des Champs, I suppose? But yeah, it was a fascinating festival. There were some winners who were exceptionally lucky to win, like Brazil, and one of the novices as well was this. One of the Novice Chases as well was desperately fortunate to avoid a faller in front of him. And even as Andy mentioned, it could have gone all horribly wrong for a Constitution Hill. It was such a sliding doors moment in the race as Dysart Dynamo fell. So there were a lot of winners who were really worthy winners, but just avoided something that would have been a catastrophe. And just my thoughts go out to, before we finish up, to Nolan Valerie Moran with Ginto, because they didn't have a winner at the festival, but they would have happily, gone to the next day. And there was a lot of talk about, the money that was spent on Florin Porter off a Facebook ad, I think, and a lot of people in the parade ring loving that you can buy a dual Sayers Hurdle winner for small money. Like, Noel Moore really put his money where his mouth is with Ginto, and I don't know how you can get something as unlucky as that. So I hope Noel and Valerie have luck going forward, even if Ginto won't.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said, Johnny. Echo those sentiments entirely. That brings us to a close. The first ever Cheltenham 2023 preview with Johnny Ward and Andy Holding. Hopefully some nuggets in there from...
We're doing one next week, are we?
Yeah, we've done another one. The road to Cheltenham starts here.
We just have to contradict each other and ourselves every second week.
Yeah.
That's it, yeah.
I did think it was funny, especially in the Champion Chase, so much talk about the ground and Shiskhkin and Energumene, and then Tony Bloom after the race, were you worried about the rain falling? He said, no, what are you talking about? We were doing rain dances. We wanted the rain. It just shows all the chat that goes into it, and actually what plays out can often make fools of us all. But lots of good stuff in there, plenty of insight, and hopefully some value in there too. Thanks very much to 888 Sport for sponsoring this podcast as ever. Thank you to both Andy and for Johnny for taking the time to talk to us as well. We'll speak to them again soon. Do download the oddschecker app for Andy's tips straight to the app every morning of racing, as well as the best prices, bookie offers, free bets, and each way terms. They're up on the app as well. Do subscribe to our YouTube channel and our podcast feed on the YouTube channel. Plenty more content every week coming from Andy and I, racing weekly there as well, with Rishi Prasad and Sam Turner too. So do check that out as well. Fingers crossed, some excitement and some insight to keep us busy for the next year or so. Plenty of racing coming up as well. So do stay tuned, and please, as always, gamble responsibly.